and today, as I said, closer to 100 billion. How did that happen? It happened because we believed very strongly in a set of values, a core purpose, and a reason for being that was not just about the purpose of making money. But here we are many years later, and I'm asking myself serious questions about what is the role and responsibility of a public company in the world that we are living in today. And whether you are Republican or Democrat or independent, I think we probably all can agree on one thing, and that is that the values, the respect, the dignity, the civility that we once saw every day in American life, that we see in this room, is not what we are witnessing every day. Just 2 months ago, while I was in Europe with my wife, we took a side trip and we went to Normandy. I'd never been to Normandy. I don't know, I'm sure many of you have. And when you walk through that cemetery and you have a deep, deep sense of the bravery, the valor, the sacrifice of what we all have benefited from, and you compare that to where we are today, there's a big, big gap between the level of bravery, valor, and sacrifice and citizenship in terms of then and now. As we were leaving Normandy, a car pulled up and I heard an American voice, and I got out of my car and I went to speak to them. It's a young couple from Baltimore, Maryland. I just simply asked, what brought you to Normandy today? And the woman, who was a nurse, did not miss a beat. She said to me, we came to Normandy to be reminded of who we once were. And I honestly, I didn't know whether to cry. I just felt like a spear went through my heart to have to go to Normandy to be reminded of who we once were. So I've been traveling the country and trying to speak to the American people in ways that would give me insight and perspective about the promise of the country, the American dream, and at the same time recognize that what's going on in Washington and what's going on with both parties, and has been going on for many years prior to the election of Donald Trump, is not who we are. And we have a big question in front of us about what kind of country we want to live in, and how do we restore the civility, respect, dignity, and values that we hold so true. Sitting in this room, and you start your meeting singing a song, and you play along a little game, and that game is a manifestation of giving money to organizations and social causes. That in of itself is the spirit of the country. You represent everything that is good with America. But unfortunately, there's things going on in the country that divides us. And the dysfunction and the polarization in Washington should not define the spirit of America and the spirit of our people. For young people in America, adolescent, teenagers, they are growing up right now, living through 18 plus years of war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Just think about that. That's all they've known. We're sitting here as a country, $20 trillion in debt and $400 billion in interest expense every year. We have a problem with immigration that should be solved by trying to create a consensus on how do we solve this problem in a way that can produce the best of both parties in a way that there is compromise. All of these issues should not be as polarized and filled with such vitriolic hate and divisiveness. That's not who we are. And so our company, over the last 40 years or so, have benefited dramatically from the opportunity of the entrepreneurial spirit of the country. America is the only place where a kid from the projects, from public housing, could go from where I came from to this moment in time. And the promise of America and the American dream is alive and well, but not alive and well in Washington. And it's really important that we all recognize the power of citizenship, the power of the individual, the power of our democracy, and what has been sacrificed over so many years by so many to give us the privilege of being an American. So I stand before you as someone who has benefited dramatically from the American opportunity. And I also stand here before you as a profound, concerned citizen about the future of the country and what I think is necessary for the kind of leadership and truthfulness and authenticity that we need to restore the values, respect, dignity, and our standing in the world. I also want to tell you that, believe it or not, I lived in North Carolina for 1 year. You didn't know that. Where's the...
That's not on Wikipedia.
Yeah. Before Starbucks, I lived in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1980 and worked in High Point. And I had a great experience. I was young, I was single. That's a whole other story. But it is an honor for me to be here, and my heart is filled with real joy in seeing what the Rotary is all about, and the kinship and the friendship and the sense of humanity. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much. So I want to make my own personal donation as well. So it's been 38 years since I lived in North Carolina. So here's it. I think this is $50. I rounded it up. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you have, and certainly anything you'd like to ask me. Yes, sir.
Are you going to run for political office? Have you thought about that?
Yes. I wonder why you would ask that question. And, I have not made any decision about that. I spend my days working at Starbucks. That's why I'm here. But I am here as a concerned citizen. So I don't have an answer to that question today.
What office would you consider? Follow up.
Are you a reporter? No, I'm not here to talk about that issue, sir. Thank you. Yes.
How do you share your philosophy while which you operate your company with your employees that are in the stores that we see every day?
So we are a company that, despite the advance of technology, we're a face-to-face company. In fact, I met Bob today, who's a 10-year Starbucks partner, and it was really great to see you. We have quarterly meetings all over the world, which we call open forums. And we do use an application on Facebook called Workplace, where we're able to talk directly to all of our people. But we are a company that over-communicates about our values, our purpose, what we're trying to do, and obviously the financial fiduciary responsibility we have as a public company. But what we really talk about the most is what it means to be a servant leader, and that is to be in service of others. I was in Costa Rica yesterday, believe it or not, and in an interview I was asked about leadership, and someone said, if you had to point to one person today, who do you think is the leader that you admire the most? And the person interviewed was quite surprised. I'm Jewish, and the answer to my question was the Pope. He's the servant leader of our time. Someone who outwardly says, who am I to judge? Someone who kneels on his knees to clean and wash the feet of a homeless peasant, and someone who I think demonstrates the degree of humility that we need in this world. Yes?
What sort of community outreach programs or initiatives are you involved in as a company?
So there's two issues with regard to that question. One is my wife and I, almost 20 years ago, started a family foundation. And because of the success of Starbucks, I don't think we ever imagined the foundation would grow to the level it has. And there's kind of three planks to that. One is we have been deeply involved with the military. We are very fortunate in that we have Secretary Robert Gates, who sits on the Starbucks board, who educated us a number of years ago about the million-plus extraordinary young men and women who were coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, but with coming back without a parade, without a job. And the hard facts is that 99% of the American public had no skin in the game with regard to the people wearing the cloth of the nation. And so we have spent a great deal of time and resources helping people transition back from the military. That's one issue. Second issue is there's 6 million young people in America, mostly African American and Hispanic, who are not working and not in school, labeled as opportunity youth. And we are directly involved in trying to create a first job for those young people. And the last is something my wife has been involved in Seattle, which is one of the most progressive cities in America that has one of the worst homeless problems in America, and working with homeless. With regard to Starbucks, in almost every community in America, we are involved in some local level. We have started building community stores in which the profits from those stores goes back to the community. Stores that you wouldn't believe we would be in, and it turns out those stores are quite profitable. Probably the best example is a store in Ferguson, Missouri, where there was so much social unrest. The company is now involved in an unpopular decision from the administration in hiring refugees, because that is what we believe we need to do. We're doing everything we can to try and create the right, honest dialogue in the country about DACA and Dreamers. There's 800,000 young kids in America who could be deported, and there's a lot of issues that relate to that, and we employ a lot of those kids. So there are a number of things that we are trying to do as a company that demonstrates what we believe we have to do to demonstrate the conscience of the company. You will see us be directly involved in voter registration to get as many people in America to register to vote. There's a lot of activities in the country that are preventing people from voting that we don't think is fair and just. And just being the kind of company that people would respect and trust.
Howard, how do we take this example of Starbucks being a catalyst for social change and broaden that to really a different economic mission where it includes social issues?
Well, I think, the rules of engagement, I think, are changing rapidly, and I think the power that business leaders and businesses have, one, because Washington can't solve every problem, but two, we can affect so many communities that we are living and working in. We can do a lot more for our people, we can do a lot more for our communities, and Starbucks is living proof that those kinds of initiatives go right to the bottom line. And I'm inspired by the fact that many companies, small and large, public and private, are doing extraordinary things for the communities and their people across the country. And we're not a perfect company. We make mistakes, we have challenges, and we're just trying to learn from that. Yes?
Two questions. So, Starbucks is one of the few companies since the corporate tax break that took place recently.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, Starbucks is one of the few companies that has taken advantage of the corporate tax breaks to reinvest in their employees.
Yeah.
Whether it's wages or stock
Yes.
ownership. How did you make that decision to do that versus like a share buyback that
Right.
other companies were doing? And the second question is, employees, when it comes to employees, customers, and shareholders, how do you rank those three
Yeah.
in terms of importance?
Sure.
What's the thinking behind that?
Well, thank you for the question. I think it's a very appropriate question. I'll take the latter first. I mentioned in 1987 we had 11 stores, and we created this pyramid, and at the top of the pyramid were our people, customers and shareholders. And not to say that shareholders were at the bottom of the pyramid, but we said the following. If we're going to build a great enduring company that's going to create shareholder value, we have to exceed the expectations of our people so they can exceed the expectations of the customer. And so early on, we recognized that we were in the coffee business serving people, but the truth is we're in the people business serving coffee. In terms of your second question, which I think is a very important question in relationship to the tax cut, and unfortunately what I believe could have and should have been done, and what was done. So the hard facts is, as I said earlier, the country as it sits today, if it was a business, would be a business in dire, dire trouble. How can we possibly sustain an income statement of $20 billion in debt, paying $400 billion in interest per year? And that debt, by the way, is growing because interest rates are getting higher. So when the tax cut came, what I was hoping for is that we would have seen a transformational tax, not only corporate tax, but a transformational change in the tax code that would have provided relief and also opportunities to reinvest in infrastructure and education and things of that nature. The 21% cut in corporate tax from 35%, I can almost promise you that the large majority of companies that are benefiting from that tax break are not going to reinvest it appropriately with their people. We decided as a public company, we had a fiduciary responsibility to give some of that back to the shareholders, but we gave 40% back to our people. And by the way, we were criticized for that by certain people on Wall Street who believed that that money was theirs. That money was not theirs. And what we're going to find is that the 21% tax cut that now exists is going to add $1 trillion or $2 trillion to the national debt, and it's not going to provide what I would say was really the fool's gold attached to that kind of opportunity. I mean, Warren Buffett did not need a $29 billion benefit, and I'm sure he's going to do the right thing and it's going to go to the right places. But it was a real missed opportunity to have a comprehensive level of transformation of our tax code as opposed to a corporate tax cut that's not going to help the people who need it the most. Yes, sir?
Does Starbucks support things such as Rotary and Chamber of Commerce locally?
Oh, absolutely. We are engaged locally in organizations like yours, and without question. Yeah. I don't want to leave on a bad note because you have a question. Okay, we got to have it better.
How did you come to Starbucks?
I came to Starbucks because I took a trip to Italy in 1983, the first time I was in Italy, and I came across the Italian coffee bar. For those of you who have been to Italy, it's ubiquitous, lots of them. And I looked at it and had this epiphany that perhaps it was something that we could recreate and build something like that in America and literally create this third place between home and work and elevate what coffee was then and what it could be. And that gave me the opportunity. Unfortunately, I did not have any money. And that's a whole other story that we don't have time for. But you know, I've benefited from the entrepreneurial opportunity, and the United States has given me a opportunity to take our company public and benefit from the capital markets. But I leave you with how I started, and that is that the future of the country is based on our ability to maintain and enhance our level of civility, values, respect, dignity, so we don't have to go to Normandy to be reminded of who we once were. By being here today, you have reminded me of who we are. Thank you very much.